Puffer.
Yep.
Excellent. We're all in attendance tonight. Welcome, everyone. We'll start off with a review of the minutes from our September 18th meeting.
On page 4 of the minutes, the last paragraph, it says McCann brings attention to section 8 on design. I wanted to check what section 8 could refer to and if we could make it specific. I believe I can tell you exactly the section I was referring to in the TMOD. It is section 505-H-2-B and C.
That makes sense. Yes, we will note that.
I know that's extremely pedantic.
That is
it should be
appropriate
helpful.
to note the specific section.
Okay.
I move we approve the minutes with that one amendment.
I second.
If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Excellent. Thank you very much. Any public comments tonight? Not related to the agenda we have in front of us. Okay, moving on. Communications received by the board. Joseph?
Couple of quick communications here. So there is a community transportation needs assessment survey being done statewide by New Hampshire Community Transportation. Just if anybody's interested in that, particularly, folks who have, it's not specifically tied to the 10-year plan or any of the transportation funding discussions. This is largely focused on perhaps caregivers, social service, but anyone can take the survey, particularly trying to identify community transportation needs. So if anybody's interested in that, that is available online, and we can certainly share the link as well.
That'll be helpful.
Is that NHDOT?
They are involved in this, but it is actually New Hampshire Community Transportation, which is keepnhmoving.com is the name of the website for this organization. And they are not an agency of DOT, but they are quasi-state. I don't know exactly their organizational structure, but they are comprised of the mobility managers, statewide mobility managers, and work closely with the regional planning commissions.
May I ask a question that relates to like the pressure on the DOT and the GASSET hearings and all that kind of stuff right now?
Yeah, of course.
So I know there have been conversations, and it seems like they're getting more and more public steam and recognition about the lack of gas tax and toll funding compared to other states and even compared to some of our own history. And that seemed like kind of like an outlier in a conversation in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I hear more and more about that part of the conversation.
Yep.
To what extent is that part of things that the GASSET hearings are having heard,
Mm-hmm.
and B, a part of this conversation that we either should or shouldn't meaningfully bring up in some way?
Yes, that's a really good question. The answer is yes and no. So they are a part of the discussion. Revenue sources are on the docket that the GASSET, DOT, and the council, governor and council are discussing with people, and it is one of the items they're seeking feedback on at these hearings, whether to look at the gas tax, look at raising tolls, because there is that roughly $400 million in difference between the transportation plan and the expected revenues at current levels. Therefore, they are soliciting feedback on ways to look at it from the other side too, in addition to the cutting side, which is also what we've seen some of the early discussion on, as you said. So I would say yes, definitely that's on the table. Whether that is going to be done is totally going to be something that the governor and council and legislature need to determine. The governor and council have the authority to set the tolls, I've learned, mostly anyway, and obviously the other issues would be legislative, but they are being discussed as a part of this. But the 10-year transportation plan does not need to address that. You can have a 10-year transportation plan that includes all these projects, that doesn't address that, but I think their goal is to try and address revenue and funding, and spending at the same time.
It's good to hear that's part of the conversation, because it wasn't in the beginning, it seemed like.
Yeah, I would say that's fair. And just to follow up on that, I suppose the Plymouth hearing, to weigh in on the draft 10-year transportation plan, whether it's those issues or the 10-year plan more broadly, the 20th of October, 6 p.m. at Pease Public Library is the date for that hearing. That will be an opportunity to weigh in on the draft. So DOT has released a draft of the transportation plan. Of course, this is how we found out that Smith Bridge Road intersection is cut, and also that North Main Street improvements are proposed to be not included in the plan. So it's an opportunity to talk about those. It's also an opportunity to talk about, really anything that deals with this sort of long-range transportation vision for New Hampshire. And then just the last communication, just an update on something that we had not heard back on in a while, but the Housing Champions designation that we had applied for, the town was, as of Monday or Tuesday of this week, designated as a housing champion. So that is good news. It gives us potentially, over the next 3 years, some level of preference in certain state decision-making with regards to funding. It's not incredibly clear what is going to be specifically available to the town. That being said, there will be at some point, I would say in the near future, the state BEA will be reaching out to the town to schedule some kind of event activity here in Plymouth to make the sort of formal proclamation of Plymouth as this housing champion. But I think it's opportune that Judy's here, because certainly many of the items that gave the town the points to be designated as a housing champion did come out of the HOP project that we all and Judy had worked on for quite some time. So good news, more to come. No specific funding or decisions that come with that right now, but there could be over the next 3 years. So we'll just have to kind of stay tuned and see what funding programs are made available.
Thank you, Joseph. Any reports from committees? Sue, do you have any updates on
Nope, I have not heard anything about budget yet. I don't know if it,
CIP.
CIP, nope,
Nothing.
nope.
I know Scott is reaching out to department heads to solicit input.
Have you been looped in on any of that?
Nope, I haven't heard anything.
Any other committees sitting here tonight that have updates?
LRPC.
Please.
Um,
Love LRPC.
So LRPC has had its first executive board meeting and its first commissioner meeting, and we've approved the annual budget, and a few other minor things were approved as well. Changes to which we're not part of anyway, the hazardous waste collection and a few other things were discussed and approved. And the budget, despite cuts to grants and state funding and all the other things that have been up in the air and not doing so well, the budget's not looking so bad actually for the LRPC. And I would say part of that is some pretty strong new leadership in Shanna in the past year. Shanna Saunders, the new executive director, and she has been, I think, really pushing LRPC to be doing a lot more work in communities, like basic planning work, circuit riders, help with master plans and HOP grants and other stuff like that. That has helped pay some of the bills, and so a little bit of creative thinking and also just good hard work on their part. And so I think that was better news than a lot of people expected.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Would Economic Development Committee report at this point?
Yes, please.
We have our first meeting on Monday.
I love the
So,
update.
you know,
Can't wait.
we'll see.
And we have a
Very
committee.
much.
And we have a committee, yeah.
Excellent. I think one of the great potential things of that committee is when people come in front of us for consultations and they're looking for more feedback on what do you want to see to help succeed. I think that's where the Economic and Development Committee really can step in
Sure,
and
yeah.
help out with that conversation.
Yeah, makes sense.
Excellent. Good luck on the first meeting.
Thank you.
My pleasure. All right, moving on to item number 7 on the agenda tonight, new business. Joseph, will you take us into this?
Sure. So, generally speaking, I'm just going to defer right over to Judy, but we have the Housing Master Plan chapter discussion continuation. We did finish the 6-word story activity, and I think this is going to be an opportunity to kind of talk about where we're going from here with this project. This is a part of the HOP 2.0 Housing Opportunities Planning Grant that the town received to do this Housing Master Plan chapter update.
Excellent, thank you.
Discussion.
Welcome, Judy.
Thank you.
Nice to see you again.
It's good to be here. I'm actually very happy to be here, and I'm hoping that the sound is working properly. Unless I've done this wrong, I've shut the volume off on my laptop, so I'm coming through your sound system, am I right?
Who do we have in the audio video booth tonight? John?
We do have John. Yep.
John, are you hearing everything properly? Thank you very much.
Okay, super. Well, that's a relief, because that was a little bit of a panic. I wasn't sure this was actually going to work. For some reason, my MacBook went through a major update while I was home, and when I got here, it didn't look anything like it usually does, and it was a bit of a crisis, but here we are. So I have to tell you, when I was thinking about this meeting, I thought I better go back and just take a look at the last master plan, and it hit me as I was looking at it. I don't think there's anyone on this board who was on the planning board when that master plan was done. So I thought it would be a good idea tonight if we talked a little bit about just like, what is a master plan and how does the housing element in particular relate to other elements that will be in your master plan update when you do it? So we can start thinking now about how to integrate some of these things. You know, how does housing relate to land use? How does it relate to economic development? How does it relate to all these other things that we can be thinking about in working on the housing element that might be very helpful to all of you, both for this element and then also moving forward. So if you bear with me, that's kind of where my thinking was for this, this meeting tonight. So I'm assuming everybody knows what the state statute says, but I'm going to cover just a little bit of that so everybody's clear. Your statute is a little different from some others. No state has the same master plan statute, so I want to just talk a little bit about what it says and why have one at all, and then how does housing maybe help you think about other things that may be a need in your community. So, you know, the easy, I want to just shut this part off if I possibly can make this go away. Go away. Voila, good. You know, the easy explanation is, it's like the master plan proper is where you want this town to be in the future, based on what you know today. So there's always in every master plan kind of a sense of what the vision is, and hopefully some set of shared principles in the community that people can agree on that might help you decide sticky points, you know, things that perhaps people don't necessarily agree with. At a policy level, perhaps if you can kind of talk about things as basic principles, sometimes people can reach agreement. Understanding who is here today and what you think this place is going to be like in the future. Also thinking about not only just how the town might grow or change, but also your preservation needs, which I can just tell you from the work we do in housing, preservation's a big part of that conversation. There are communities that are kind of losing some of the historic fabric of their communities as housing ideas about what's a good housing unit changes. So thinking about the ways in which preservation might fit together with some of your housing needs is a good way to think about integrating pieces. There's always like an action plan. What are we going to do? And I always say when we work on master plans with communities, it's not just like getting to the action plan where you say, these are the things we're going to do and who's going to do it and how long is it going to take, but how are you actually going to stay on top of what your plan said, which is part of what I want to get into tonight a little bit, is just who's paying attention to the 2018 plan and how much got done, if not just in housing, but perhaps other pieces, and what perhaps are you going to want to carry over to the next plan? Because there are things that end up in master plans that were really good ideas, but maybe they couldn't be done in like the 5 or 10 year window for the plan, but you don't want to lose the idea. So I don't bring up like what didn't get done to be a punitive way, but just to sort of recognize that there are some things that take just a really long time. So you're going to cooperate with me. There we go. We certainly saw from some of the discussions we had around housing last year that a lot of this is about balancing competing interests. Some people want more dense housing. Some people want the community to stay predominantly single family. Some people want to see affordability. Some people are anxious about what workforce housing might mean for a sort of change in the dynamic of the town. So it's sort of like understanding what these competing interests are and then trying to decide what is the actually most important thing that you want to accomplish. Getting to a decision-making process that's internally consistent so you don't have master plan elements. We call each chapter of the plan an element. So you don't end up with elements going off in different directions. And I think there's a little bit of that in the last plan. It's sometimes inescapable that you're going to have things going off in different directions, but you try to minimize it. If the plan is clear, then it helps not only you guys in terms of zoning changes you may decide to make or not make in the future, but also hopefully your developer community and your residents have some sense of what the community said it wanted to be. So that's the perfect, that's the perfect kind of outcome. Your state's master plan statute is really interesting because it stays very focused at its most elemental level on the physical evolution of a town. And when I typically explain master planning to communities, what I say is, it is a plan for the physical evolution of your town, taking into account what your future needs are for housing, what your future needs are for a local economy, what your future needs are going to be for public facilities. But it is fundamentally a physical development plan, which is why land use is so critical. But your statute then goes on to say you have to have a vision and you have to have a land use element. But there's all these other cool elements that you might want to consider. And I actually am going to get into that a little bit in this presentation because I think that some of these topics are going to be very important for Plymouth. You can see the menu. It ranges from transportation to facilities, economic development, natural resources, natural hazards, recreation, public services, cultural and archaeological resources, regional concerns, neighborhood plan, community design, housing. Community design is sort of like what we want this place to look like. And typically you might have a community design element for an area of your town, like downtown. There's always supposed to be an implementation piece. It's like, doesn't help if you have a vision and a land use element and you don't have implementation. So these are like the other things that you can include by state law. And I think when you get to the point that you're going to scope the master plan update, you're going to want to think about these options. Because I think some of these have direct bearing on where you are as a community and where some of your needs are likely to be. By the way, I'm not going to talk at you the whole time. I'm going to ask you questions in a couple of minutes. So you're required, whether you're doing a full-blown master plan or the sort of basic vision and land use piece, you have to inform the public so people know what's going on. Here we are. And also your regional planning commission. You can adopt a plan in whole or in part. And I think in New Hampshire, because you have so many small towns up here and nobody's got gigantic master plan budgets, it's not that uncommon to find plans that get done incrementally. As people have money, they'll do this element or they'll do that element. And over a course of several years, they end up with a master plan update. Some communities do the whole thing, all together. So you have a choice as a board, whether you're going to implement pieces of it or try to do an entire plan and adopt it all at once. And then if you're going to do it on a sectional basis, the statute says there's a couple of ways you can do that. One of which might be sort of particular needs-based, but the other is the functional elements of the plan, which is exactly what you're doing right now. When you're going to work on a housing element of a master plan, you're taking a functional element and you're focusing on that. And what I'd like to do is enable the town through this process to be thinking ahead to these are things we're going to have to talk about in the bigger master plan update. The crayons are there for a reason. We were trying to integrate a few of the stories that came through from the Sixth Third Story project. I wish I could have put more of them in this slide deck. But in answer to the question, what is home to you, one person said crayons, puzzles, blocks, balls, friendships, and childhood. And some of these are just lovely. That's why I wanted to get people off of talking about housing and thinking about what home means. Because it really can help to sort of shift the way people think about what are we trying to do in terms of the kind of community we're trying to build. The basic steps, visioning the baseline, there's data analysis, understanding what your opportunities are, selecting a course of action, implementation, monitoring, and then how are you going to update the plan. Those are just basic steps to any master plan process, and they're basic steps even for one element of a plan. So you're going to hear about this through the eyes of the housing element, but when you get to the larger master plan update, you're going to have to deal with all these things for all the other elements as well. The existing conditions piece, which is very much kind of what we're working on right now, is what's the inventory? So what is the actual housing inventory in this community? We look to assessors' data, we look to data from the Census Bureau, we look to wherever we can find it. The inventory is more complicated than just number of units. It's also the kinds of units you have, because you want to be thinking about to what extent does the housing stock we have or the inventory we have relate to the needs of the people who are here now and who are likely to be here in the near future. Understanding the sources of data that are available to you to actually answer some of these questions. It's easy for housing because you got me here, but I mean, some of these elements it's a little bit trickier as to where you're going to get your information. There's a lot of mapping involved. We're trying to update the maps that we worked on for phase 1 of the HUB project right now, but we need to look at maps. It's like I said, it's a physical evolution plan. We do use sometimes in master plans proprietary data. So sometimes a community may not have a license for something like CoStar, which is a housing market source. We try to tap those sources as well because it's what we're getting paid to do. But not every community has access to this. So if there are proprietary sources, you use them. If not, that's just the way it is. And they can be very enriching. And then thinking about the questions that people are asking in your community. So we kind of did some of this work under HOP 1, but I guess I want to ask you folks, since we're all here, like, what questions do you think people in Plymouth ask about housing or want to ask about housing? What do they want to know and what do they care about? So this is a question for you guys. I don't have to answer this one, you do. What questions do people have about housing here?
People think housing in Plymouth is too high.
Too expensive?
Too expensive
Okay.
for the area.
Do they want to know why it's so expensive, or do they just have an opinion that it's expensive?
Well, we have our ideas why.
Okay.
I would say they want to know why it's so expensive.
Well,
That's what I've heard.
we have a very, very heavy percentage of non-taxable property in our town.
When you say expensive, you're also referring to incorporating the cost of property taxes with the cost of real estate.
Well, taxes play into it.
They do, but I mean, tax burden, I think tax burden and housing, like, you can't separate them, but at the same time.
Yeah, I think they go hand in hand, that a lot of people are asking, why are my taxes so high? Which is part of living.
But they are two separate questions in some ways, though.
Well, they are.
The cost of
I don't disagree.
producing housing and construction costs.
Oh, yeah.
Is
I don't think anyone's refuting that
and-
point, but the point that I think a lot of people right now in the community are saying, when it comes to cost of living, they're saying, why are my taxes so high?
Well, they are concerned about the fiscal impact and what causes that fiscal impact on their town.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of ideas and misinformation and truths all kind of mixed in there. And I think some people want to know what the actual real impact is and whether or not it's worth it for what we're getting for that investment. And it might be.
When I moved to town, I was not wedded to living in Plymouth. I was looking at housing in the area, and I looked at houses in Holderness and Plymouth, and
Yep.
if I was comparing apples and oranges, the houses in Holderness were generally more expensive, and I think it's a market effect where people who have homes in Holderness that are comparing, they know they can ask more because the taxes are lower.
Certainly,
So
100%.
right. So my observation was, unless I pay off my home, my monthly payment is going to be the same on a house in Plymouth as it is in the house in Holderness. Houses in Holderness have a higher purchase price but lower taxes. Houses in Plymouth have a higher or lower purchase price and higher taxes. Your monthly payment's the same. I'd rather be close.
Well, your monthly
Which
payment
is why
isn't
I'm
the same.
here.
When your taxes are going through the roof, and you have payment, interest, tax, and insurance rolled
Except-
into escrow,
No,
they are not the same at all.
It is the same. It's
They're
exactly
not.
when you have
How so?
when you have a higher price house.
When your prices in Plymouth are outpacing the prices in taxes, because correlating side to side, your
this
tax-
was based on data 10 years ago. It may have changed since, but
I'm sure it did.
the equivalent, equivalent homes in Plymouth were certainly cheaper than they were in
I
Holderness.
think they
Which,
still are.
yeah, so
If I may, I mean, I think that this gets to the point of
markets work.
what is the actual impact and what are the things that cause that impact.
Right.
And this is a perfect illustration of that question. And also, then, whatever that impact may be, is it worth it to be in Plymouth versus Holderness based upon what other things that Plymouth has to offer versus what Holderness has to
Right.
offer,
Right.
which is
It depends on your values and what's important. to you.
exactly, yeah.
Right, I think the point is right now, questions people in the community are asking, one of them Neil brought up, is why are my taxes so high? And there's no good answer for that from any single
I think-
person in this town,
Yeah.
on any board. Why are my taxes so high?
It's
do know recently we've had
universally
some-
understood why our
speak
taxes are high.
We've
It's
had
not
some
acceptable though,
properties
just
that
because it's
are on the
understood
tax
doesn't mean it's
rolls.
acceptable.
Pardon me?
Recently, we've had some properties, rather large properties, that have been on the tax rolls. And they have either been gifted or sold to nonprofits. And what I'm getting from a lot of people is, how can we correct this? Is there anything we can do to prevent so many nonprofits from wanting to be in this town, coming here? And I don't know if there's an answer to that. I don't know what the answer is. But I do know that's a big question right now. And it's all over the internet. It's all over, you hear it in the grocery store. And the other thing that I hear people comment about is they really want, older people really want to stay in the community, but they just don't know how much longer they can afford it. And the housing, they want to downsize, but they don't know where to put the housing to downsize to.
Right.
If they were to purchase and build something smaller. So those are the things that I'm hearing.
Okay, that's helpful.
Thank you, Sue.
If I can add to the whole nonprofit like downtown question, there's the other side to that is not only
There was no downtown question, just to
I
be
mean,
clear.
I think
There-
some
you
of the
don't
ones
need to
that-
refute a point that no one brought up.
I'm not
There's no
refu-
downtown question.
I'm not refuting anything. I think some of the ones that have recently come up have been in the downtown area. I'm not sure if you're referring to those or not, but I think there have been a couple in the downtown area. And in addition to the properties going off the tax roll, which is a real concern, and I'm not refuting that. I would say in addition to that, there's also the question of like downtown vibrancy, and how will those nonprofits contribute to downtown vibrancy versus other leaseholders that could be in those same properties. So I'm not really trying to refute anything, but add yet another dimension to what it might mean for the desirability to be here. There's the fiscal impact of taxes, and then there's also downtown vibrancy and who's in those spaces.
What kind of nonprofits are we talking about?
One of them
Just
is
want to understand what we're,
what used to a long time ago be the Pembroke Bank, which was then the Northway Bank, which is Habitat. And we don't know what, they might only use the basement floor even, we don't know if we even know what's going to go on the first floor.
What's that?
And the other one is the Rite Aid.
Rite Aid.
And Mid-State.
Well, and I don't think that's been transferred yet. I know that.
Sorry.
the
But
potential-
it's been in the,
I know, but
yeah.
it's in the wings, but those are the comments I'm hearing. I'm not
Okay, that's
trying to
helpful.
give them an answer because I don't have one, and there's always positives to go along with it, but,
right,
I guess generically speaking, thrift stores and medical offices.
What?
Thrift stores and medical offices.
Which benefit veterans and benefit the homeless. So they are definitely benefiting some good agencies. No one disputes that.
Yep.
But it's just the nonprofit piece, if there was some type of a solution and people come up with ideas and they need to go present those to the people that are gonna be able to make the changes.
I've heard that other towns too have had this discussion and that are really concerned about it and trying to figure a way that something can be done about it because they're running into the same situation that I think we're running into here, where people are paying a lot more and there's a lot more of this nonprofits coming in and they're trying to figure a way of how they can do something that, they don't want them, it's just, it hurts people here as far as money-wise goes, you know? And it really does. I think it does. I don't know about the churches, they're nonprofit, aren't they?
Correct.
I mean,
That's correct, yeah.
I think they offer a
Can
lot
I
to the
speak?
town, but, yeah, and I think it's a matter of striking a balance. And it's hard to do that because there's a market and it's like,
Neil, did you have something to say?
Yeah, we've lost a great deal of our commercial properties downtown. We had 3 major banks. We lost a major drugstore. We lost a major manufacturing facility, stores. We're trying to replicate that out on Tenny Mount Highway, but the assessments on these commercial facilities keep going down. And because of the retail, you look at the numbers on the sales, the
value of retail.
residential properties are way up.
That's right.
So
Yep.
the tax burden is hitting the residential properties. And at the same time, the commercial properties are going down.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, it does. It's fine.
I think our state lacks a tool that a lot of other states recognize as valuable, which is primary home exemptions. So many states allow
Oh,
us
sure,
to-
yes, residential
So,
exemption.
I mean, if New Hampshire allowed us to exempt a certain amount of your primary residence's value from the property taxes, then more of the tax burden would be borne by businesses and second homeowners and investment real estate.
I've never even heard of that.
And that may have economic implications as well.
Oh, it certainly does,
Yeah.
but I don't think it would hurt us. You know, it would make it more costly to operate short-term rentals. But it would also shift the market in favor of families buy or primary home buyers, I
Got it.
guess. I don't believe New Hampshire allows that, but other states certainly do.
Yeah, I'm not aware that you do. I don't think you have that kind of residential exemption here. I can look
Texas
into it.
does, Pennsylvania does, there are a bunch of
What's it
states.
referred to as?
Primary residence exemption.
Yeah,
So you can't do it on your second home, but you can do it on your first home, you can't do it on a business, so like, when you think about, you know, when you take all the property values of town, in town, and you exempt everybody's, you're still dividing the total, you know, total budget by the assessed value, but, you know, the ones that don't have those exemptions end up bearing more of the cost.
Interesting.
to put it in perspective, 80% of the tax levy in Nantucket is paid by non-resident homeowners
Yeah.
That's interesting.
because
Actually,
of the
speaking about
residential
Nantucket,
exemption.
I think someone saw your 6-story board out on one of the islands.
I went to Nantucket
Yes.
and
Okay.
I saw your 6-word storyboard in the
that's what it
library
was.
there.
You're kidding,
Not
did you
kidding.
really?
I did.
Just a few
Well, you
months
should have
ago.
seen the housing meeting we did the other night.
It was Labor Day weekend, so yeah.
Watch the housing meeting we did the other night.
Oh, okay.
But on to other things, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I own property in Vermont, and my tax rate is twice as high as people who live there. But I live in New Hampshire, so I have to pay twice as much. And I'm literally funding the schools. Or people like me.
To give you a little perspective, the 6-word stories that we got here, there were a few kind of flip, you know, people were making some flip things, a few people were kind of funny, and a lot of them were just very serious and lovely. But not a lot of angst.
That's
What do
The
you
ones
mean
in
by that?
Nantucket would make you cry,
Really?
yeah.
Why?
because there are people there are so desperate.
Yeah.
So
Oh.
I like to do that activity. You find a lot of, about how people think about their community by the way they talk about their home. So,
Interesting.
So you're talking about
Anyway.
locals versus people who come for the summer?
because it was done in the local library, it's local people, for the most part. It would be local people.
Oh, very interesting.
So I was the freak that went to the library.
I appreciate you bringing this up. Thank you.
I was gonna say, one of the things we heard, I think, in the last round of HOP we did was a lot of discussion from the public and on the board and the housing committee of demographics.
Yep.
And what that means in a lot of different ways. There's again the kind of fiscal impact on taxes because of families and what kind of idea of what a family looks like are we even dealing with compared to like school impact, like are we living in 1980 or 2025, and what is the difference between those things look like, and then like older communities kind of finding a place to live that's affordable and
Yep.
what that means and how does that balance that we don't have with just like luring older residents like New Hampshire and Maine are doing right now, which is not great for their long-term like prosperity as states, including us. But at the same time, we want to be like welcoming to those communities in a balanced way. And so I think there's a lot to be said about what our vision of who we are looks like in a balanced, productive way that deals with the real numbers of like what's going on right now in terms of family sizes and all sorts of things like that.
Okay. Moving along. Your comment was timely because the other thing that typically goes into every one of these master plan elements is data analysis. So we are kind of doing some selective updating of what was done last year. But I don't want to turn this housing element of a master plan into just yet another housing needs analysis because that's not really what it is intended to be. So there's some of that in there, but really it's understanding market trends, understanding development trends. So we pay in a master plan housing element as opposed to a housing needs study. We're more likely to look at building permit trends, types of developments coming before your board, before the ZBA, to understand what the market is asking for, because that's what the building response, that's what the building community is responding to. We try to find anything relevant from the regional planning agency. You guys are in a funny location here because, as I think you already know, it's like, well, which regional planning agency do we look at? We're actually kind of looking at both, just to get a sense of what's out there that might make sense. And then trying to understand the effectiveness of existing policies, which, we'll be talking about a little bit more in these later slides, but understanding what's working for you and what's not. So, I'll just pick on one that I know is controversial here. It's the multifamily 6-unit, right? So if it's not producing any multifamily housing, is it effective or not? Well, if you said we don't want the multifamily and it's not producing it, then you might say it's very effective. If you need a variety of housing types and you can't get them, then you would look at your multifamily regulations and say, we need to do something about this. So, these are the kinds of things you end up kind of talking about in these plan elements, and I don't have an answer for you, but you're gonna have to tell me. You guys are gonna have to sort of resolve some of these points. Understanding opportunities. This is a picture from one of the meetings we did last time. And sorry for the light glare on this, but I love this map because people wrote a lot of really cool things on these maps in the meetings we had last year. So understanding what your potential opportunities might be in the context of housing is, well, where might you provide for some housing choice? Perhaps existing neighborhoods, you leave them alone, but where might you look for newer opportunities? So you look for things like commercial areas that may be underperforming. How might you beef those up? Not necessarily for housing, but perhaps for more commercial development. Do you have outdated facilities that are public buildings you're not going to use anymore, or public land? Where's the undeveloped land in the community, and how much do you want to pack on that undeveloped land? Thinking about, are there greenway connections is like an open space topic. It's sort of like how do you do trails, but to me it's also like the kind of community you're trying to build. So if you're thinking about housing opportunity areas, you might want to think about, well, where's the open space in the community that you might want people to live near? So they don't have to drive just to get to a park. And then market opportunities, obviously. So my question for you, I told you I'm going to keep throwing questions at you, is where do you think Plymouth's best opportunity areas are for housing?
Well, we
Oh, I
have a
know.
proposal.
Pardon me?
We have a proposal for, isn't it, up on, up behind, the Boulder Point, medical facility, Spear? The guy that wants to build a road that comes down and around, and he wanted to build, tiny homes, or was it,
You're not talking about the.
The Habitat.
property
Habitat
area.
homes, yeah.
Okay,
I meant, I should have said Habitat.
yeah, that's that
But
development.
that's a proposal
I
that
still
we have in
think-
front of us.
Yeah,
I guess
Well-
the question
At
of
the
opportunity
subdivision?
versus like what we already see, like people asking us for versus
Right.
what we want to see as a vision, I guess.
I think there's opportunity throughout town. I mean, I really do. It's
But some areas might be
more suitable.
more suitable, right?
And honestly, I think it's those areas we've already focused on
Yeah.
the overlay districts for. It's Fairgrounds Road. I
Eastern
think it's-
Fairgrounds,
Yeah,
yeah.
in Tenny Mountain area.
I mean, potentially North and South Maine,
Yeah.
especially North Maine, as well, which kind of connects Fairgrounds to downtown.
Does anybody disagree?
I think I kind of disagree with the downtown for
Okay.
housing.
And why do you say that?
Well, I think traditionally, it's a traditional town. It's, I think it would just be nice to keep it that way, keep it the way it is. I think to expand on housing down there, I just don't think it's the area for it. That's my personal opinion.
You're entitled to it, because everybody else here has a personal opinion, so
Can I ask kind of a specific question about, I'm not sure if it would be appropriate, but I'm kind of curious if we could do an analysis of our current housing to understand if it meets, like, does the town have a sufficient amount of housing that meets the definition of affordability as defined in the workforce housing statute? So we have a statute that basically requires that any town that doesn't already have, I forget how it's defined, I think it's a fair share of,
yeah, it's fair share analysis.
fair share of affordable housing, that they have to accept workforce housing developments. And I'm curious to know if our town would currently meet that definition. Like, could we say no to a developer? Like, do we have enough affordable housing?
It's not we have to accept it, it's that our zoning can't be prohibitive to its development.
I
It
think,
is-
no,
it's not-
I
it's not-
think,
it's
I
not a
think
qu-
there,
It's not a quota.
I think there is a flat out exemption where if your town already meets the definition of affordability and you can prove that there's sufficient affordable housing in your home, you do not have to accept proposals for new, you don't have to offer enhancements.
I guess I'm looking at the flip side of that. Like, if you don't have enough,
Right.
You don't have to accept new
it's
stuff.
Not, it's not
Yeah.
about, my question is not about, are we required to, I'm more curious about, like, does our current housing stock meet that definition of affordability? It's not what we
Yeah.
would do if we didn't or don't. I'm just curious, like, I have a feeling we might.
I think our numbers are a couple years old.
Well, I think that's why I'm wondering.
And a
if we
lot has
should-
changed as the housing prices went up.
Right, but the town just is in the middle of an reappraisal. We all see values going up, and I'd be curious to know, and we have economic data about the area median income or whatever. I think it's,
I think prices are outpacing income.
So let's just all remember that within the last, 18 months, the regional planning agencies were all supposed to update the workforce housing needs numbers. And we don't actually have current workforce housing
Okay.
needs numbers. We have future projections. So we can look at your housing values and say, all right, here's what a household at 100% of median income can afford, and here's how many housing units are assessed at or below that number.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily tell you that's what they're going to sell for, but we can,
no.
but we can look at that. I think we actually did look at that before,
I'd be
but,
curious to know if we could include that,
yeah.
at least in the
Yeah.
closing chapter.
We know that multi-unit housing is more efficient than individual housing. cost-wise and, mechanical-wise. And we have a limit on units to 6 units.
I know.
And that's holding us back.
See, I think it's not just the 6-unit issue. It's the way you define the density that's allowed for 6 units. You'll find 6-unit multifamily buildings around. I don't think they're as attractive as one that either it's a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller, but that's beside the point. 6 units is a funny number. But the way you define the density for it, it's just not economic.
What do you mean?
You require too much land.
Well, a developer is not interested.
Not for the density you're offering, no.
They need to have more units.
Right, but you can have, your density doesn't have to limit one 6-unit building per lot. You could have a standard, I'll just say this, don't shoot the messenger. You could say, well, we, in an area that has adequate water and sewer, we might allow up to 18 units an acre or 20 units an acre, but they have to be in 6-unit buildings. But you can have as many 6-unit buildings as you need on this lot in order to maximize the opportunity for density. You could do that. And then, I keep thinking about what you've said, Sue, about people having a real thing here about the 6 units. And I've thought about this a lot. It's like, well, maybe we're going at this the wrong way. Maybe we're worrying too much about how many units in the building and not talking enough about what I think the real issue is, which is density. So think about that. That if you wanted to actually provide some multi-unit housing, before you cause a community-wide heart attack about changing that number, maybe the real question is, so how many units an acre does somebody need? And the restriction stays at 6 units per building, and see what happens.
So then you have multiple buildings on a lot of 6 units,
Sure.
rather than 18 units in one building like an apartment building.
Exactly.
We do allow that already, don't we?
I don't know that you allow that
certain
density.
In certain zones, I think you do. I know we've seen proposals with multiple 6-unit buildings
Yeah,
on the same
but
parcel.
I don't think the density is sufficient to actually get you.
The developers aren't interested.
You're not giving them enough economic reason to do
Yeah.
any multifamily here.
I
So,
mean, they're looking at the dollars and cents.
like anybody else.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, are you sort of thinking that the opportunity areas we've already talked about, which are largely consistent with the last master plan, are we kind of saying those are the opportunity areas? I realize there's some disagreement about downtown, but
I don't see a lot of areas that weren't identified in the previous master plan in reality.
With the exception that we are trying to promote, potentially, we're trying to promote, Tenny Mountain currently.
right. Okay.
Can I ask, Sue, can I ask you a little bit more about downtown?
Sure.
When you're envisioning housing downtown, are you the kind of future you don't want to see? Because I'm just trying to get my vision in line with yours. Are you imagining houses instead of commercial, or are you imagining like taller buildings downtown?
Honestly, I'm not imagining anything because the way it is now, I feel like it should stay. I don't think higher.
Okay.
I think living on the street level, I don't think that's appropriate.
Okay.
What we've got now, I know we've got apartments up above.
Yeah.
Those have been there forever, and it's just, I guess it's just the traditional thing, and.
So some
I think I'm
apartments
stuck in
above.
the traditional mode, that's what it is for me, personally.
Yeah, I'm just trying to fully understand. So some apartments above, commercial below is still acceptable.
What it is, I don't see adding more.
I see. Okay.
What do you envision?
I think that I would be comfortable with having more buildings that have commercial below and some apartments above, like we were discussing last meeting, potentially next to the Flying Monkey. I think there are some buildings that could potentially have more housing downtown, and I don't know if that's necessarily a negative thing in terms of people who work downtown that might not own cars, that want to live really close to where they work, that kind of thing. So I can understand not wanting to have this like radical change to the aesthetics of downtown. But I do think there's probably some opportunities here and there for a little bit more housing.
What do you think about taller?
I think we could probably afford 1 story more, but I can see the resistance to more than 3 stories. Because then you are starting to depart from a traditional downtown aesthetic in that way.
May I add to that?
Sure.
And I would say if we look at Plymouth downtown historically, there are places where there were previously 3.5 story buildings that have later been infilled after fires with 1-story buildings.
Like the hotel, you mean?
Well, there's the hotel, there's the other church across the street from Town Hall. There was another like 3.5 story brick building across the street, a little bit north from Town Hall. There was where the current bank is that just went to, or is going to Habitat. There used to be like a 4-story wood frame building there.
So we used to have taller
So
buildings.
there used to be a lot of really large buildings downtown. Not so much in South Main, but like the core. And it really defined this. If you look at some of the historic pictures, it defined the Main Street really well and kind of framed it out. And I think in a really good way, historically, like back in the late 19th, early 20th century. And that level of development, which, I mean, 35 feet, we went higher than 35 feet historically.
Yeah.
And we still have a little bit of remnants of that. I don't necessarily see a lot higher than that being helpful, but a little bit higher would allow for a comfortable 3 stories as opposed to a kind of squeezed in 3 stories, which is what we have currently. If you're going to build 3 stories, and I wouldn't mind going a few more feet higher just to get like a developer saying, okay, I can do 3 stories without like feeling like everything's squashed in there.
This is maybe not a helpful comment, but this is also something I think about when I think about downtown, is that I do think that like the materials and the architecture of buildings really matter to the look of downtown. And you know, if you go to Boston, for example, and you see new commercial apartments buildings going in, there's a lot of flatness in the architecture, and it's very uninviting and it's not very friendly, and that's not the type of development that I'd want to see in this town.
A large proportion of the student housing in the village were apartment buildings.
Right.
And one of the owners of a large number of student housing told me that 80% of their occupants are non-students now.
We're going to get to this.
I was
You're ahead of me.
I was just going to mention, this is, we talked about this a couple of years ago.
Yes, we
like
did.
Like a 79E kind of opportunity for Russell Street in that
Getting
area.
there. Getting there. Yep. Yeah. That to me is a hidden opportunity issue in this
We have
community.
rooming houses too.
Russell Street? Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to make just a quick comment. We throw around the word development in an interesting way. And what I mean by that is that we are defining what we think the developers want, right? When a developer doesn't actually come in here and look at the rules, he's not banging on Joseph door. We don't have 500 real developers like Halliburton's and so on. Most of these developers are local people that already own property and they're actually doing retrofitting, remodeling. And the price to upgrade facilities these days, it's the cost of material and everything. It just doesn't allow for any type of upgrades or real development. When I hear development, I'm thinking from scratch. Like the Tenny Mountain here is a beautiful area, right? We could put a bunch of places up there, make it. But when we talk about downtown and so on, it's already set in its ways. We're talking making rules and changing rules, but how much is that really going to yield or give us bottom line additional tax money at the end of the day?
So this makes me think when you do your master plan, your full master plan update, you might want to consider having a specific component on downtown as well as community design and focus it on downtown and the immediate residential neighborhoods. Because I think that's part of what I'm hearing here is just what does it look like and what does it feel like to the people who are here? And that's really a design question, so.
That has come up a couple times.
If I can respond to Michael's question, and comments, I mean, I think right now, we just heard at our last meeting from a developer who wants to redevelop next to the Flying Monkey. Across the street from that, we have a brownfield site that is gonna be open presumably to redevelopment, in the not too distant future. We have buildings on South Main especially that are less than desirable, especially in terms of having parking and very long curb cuts in front of the buildings, which are really not very helpful. And some of these structures are really, as structures, not particularly valuable. Some of them are, but a couple of them I can think of that are not. So I do think there are opportunities. I don't think the vast majority is at opportunity, but I do think there are little gaps there that could actually use some guidelines what these might want to look like. And we're doing a charrette for Railroad Square, and that's an opportunity as well.
I don't know anything about that, so.
Joseph, do you want to fill that in, or?
Sure, I mean, we got approval from Plan New Hampshire to do a charrette of the Railroad Square, Depot Street, basically from the Senior Center, Rotary Amphitheater Park, down to the skate park, so that will be. So we're still waiting a little bit on some communication from them about what exactly that's going to look like as far as next steps, planning, scheduling, team members, but they'll be working with us. Their goal is actually as soon as spring of next year to do a community design charrette looking at that area.
Okay.
Can I add one thing? That was also, it's also being partially or fully funded through the HOP program. It's a charrette
right.
plus HOP, which means there's supposed to be some kind of housing consideration as part of that
Okay.
design process.
That's true, yes.
So is that going to overlap with our timeline here? Because I think ours is September 2026 or something, I forget.
I think
Yes.
that's right. I think it will, and I think that, generally speaking, they sort of slotted us in when they could, because as you said, it is a HOP. It is a one-time sort of funded opportunity to do these through
Got it.
HOP.
Got it.
So they just slotted us in when they could, and that worked out to be.
Okay, super, that's great. All right.
I had to bracket that. I had to look at the use table, but I think you could get as many as 3 6-unit buildings on an acre
Okay,
in a multifamily residential. Like, I think that might be the most density we would see.
How many? 3?
Because we have the minimum lot is 7,500 plus 2,500 per dwelling unit. So each 6-unit building as an additional would be 15. Yeah, a third of an acre.
right, but you still have to take out land for parking and,
Right. You could squeeze it
yeah, I'm just saying that,
in. Theoretically, you
yeah,
could.
I get it, I understand. Because nobody's going to be doing underground parking with a 6-unit building, sorry, that's just not going to happen.
If I may, Judy, can I take us way backward for a second?
Sure,
I'm curious what your thoughts are about who the audience is for a master plan. I've seen master plans that have been like this very technically oriented and the general public would just glaze over looking at it. And I've seen master plans that are really readable and exciting and may not be as technical in some ways. And there's kind of a middle ground there as well. And that's kind of, who is the public for a master plan?
so there's a reason why it's the planning board that has authority for preparing and adopting one, because that's where you lead. So, the reason to have the public involved in the development of the plan is to try to make sure you don't end up with something that is so alien to the people in your community that when it comes to implementation, which is what this slide is about, that you can't get anywhere. So you have to communicate with the public, but then you also have to lead. I mean, there are times when you have to say, the community doesn't feel ready for this, but we can see based on data analysis and projections and so forth that this is going to be a need. So how do we then bring the community along? It's probably not something you're going to do coming right out of the gate. But you ask a good question. You want to have something that people can digest at the public level when you're trying to ask them to make, say, major zoning changes. But in the end, I'm absolutely convinced that a lot of this work is about helping a community's leadership lead. plan itself isn't going to sell Joe Public usually on something. It can help, you know, a nice crisp sort of, I'll call it an executive summary for the sake of anything else, can be very helpful. One-page handouts on a topic can be helpful. But to me, it's about making sure the leadership in the community has the information they need to lead the community toward addressing the problems that are in that plan.
Thank you.
That's how I see it. So, the housing element will have a piece of implementation. Your bigger master plan is going to have, you know, clearly far more. But typically what you try to talk about is, so here are the things we agreed we want to do. So who's responsible for this? And of course, when it has to do with land use change, it's the planning board. But there may be other things that come out of a master plan, perhaps having to do with, you know, utility upgrades or something where somebody else has a responsibility. But they all have to be sort of rowing in the same direction. And I think one of the things I like about the New Hampshire master plan statute is that if you have a plan that's prepared in accordance with the state law, you then become the entity that's sort of driving the capital improvements plan. And that is, that's the way it should be, as opposed to treating it as simply a financial document. But there ought to be some way to sort of integrate how are we thinking about capital improvements in our community with where we want our population centers to be. So these are all kind of the things that go into thinking about the implementation framework. Is this going to cost us money, and where is it going to come from? Do we have adequate staff capacity to do whatever? Within what timeline can something be done? And then, you know, do we need professional support or not? And those are just all things that get plugged into that implementation program. So when you decide to take something on, it isn't that you're just sort of making it up out of whole cloth. So I just want to kind of look at a few things here that are going to relate to this work on the housing section, because I think they're inescapable. So a land use element, you're going to do this whenever you update your master plan. You're going to look at your existing zoning, understanding where your open space and environmentally sensitive areas are. Those ought to be mapped even for the housing element, so that you're not encouraging population centers where you don't want them, but at the same time thinking about how do you give people who live in your community the best possible access to open space resources that exist. Understanding how your permitting process works. Is it working as well as it could? Are there things that perhaps don't need to be a special exception? Are there things that really do need to be? Is the conditional use permit useful to any of you? You know, where are the places in your community where today the land use pattern doesn't address what you really want to see in your town? And where does the zoning not match the existing land uses? We did some of this with, you know, the previous HOP grant, where we were looking at how much of your zoning made properties non-conforming, because the zoning had been changed over time so much that what you had on the ground and what you had in your zoning ordinance were, you know, worlds apart. Understanding land use in the adjacent communities is important. Sometimes communities when they're working on a master plan, get really silo, like this is my town. But you really ought to know what's around you as well, because it may influence and inform decisions that you're going to make. And then I think this is kind of a no-brainer, but understanding where the infrastructure is to support growth, understanding commuting patterns as well, can sort of help you think about where might you want to have more housing than less. It's like, where are people actually going to go to work? This is sort of obvious. The housing, we're going to be doing this housing inventory profile, looking at pricing in relation to what the incomes are in your community. Are there neighborhoods here where they're undergoing change or undergoing some kind of stress for whatever reason? We're going to want you to kind of tell us so we can focus in on that. Housing needs based on demographic trends, that's kind of been done, unless there's something that you want to know that's not addressed in the previous needs analysis. What is the inventory of workforce housing, to your point? I mean, at this point, we can talk about how units are priced here. We can look at, does the zoning actually meet the sort of basic requirements of the law, which I think it probably does. Doesn't mean you're going to get the workforce housing, but I think you probably meet what the statute intends. You had a question?
I'm interested, I think this is some very interesting, so when I think about, you know, where people go to work, you know, what abutting communities what's happening in abutting communities, I think it's also important to consider what's happening in the communities where people go to work. Because
Yeah, oh, yeah.
because I know there are a lot of people who choose to live in Plymouth because it's the nearest community that they can afford to live in, but they commute to Hanover.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Because the real estate market in Hanover is so
insane.
expensive that
insane.
by the time you get out past the high
Yep.
value property, you're basically in these communities with very little community.
Yeah,
And people, if you want a community, you have to go a little further. So like
right.
people end up in Plymouth.
yep,
Or people.
Makes
who-
sense.
Yeah, so it's you know, it's an hour away, but there are people who commute, and you know, there are people that commute to Concord or Manchester,
right.
like me.
yep.
So
Yeah, commuting patterns, understanding like, where do people in your community go to work?
right,
And where are people coming from who work in your community? Both are true. I mean, that often tends to come up in the economic development section, but I mean, it's integrally related to housing, so that's why it's on here. And then just like, what housing do you currently allow by your zoning and what do you not? I think we all kind of understand that, but that's typically content that would go in a housing element. So my question for you is, since we've talked so much about housing here for the last 15, 18 months, what do you wish you knew about housing in your town today that you don't know now?
It's a great
What are
question.
your unanswered questions?
Well, this town used to be a walking town.
A walking town?
Yeah, all the industry and commercial properties were like on Main Street or nearby. And or maybe Sprague Electric was one of the newer industries on Highland Street. And people literally walked to work. And they lived in the village, and a lot of people lived in apartments and rooming houses.
Yep.
Schools were even in
And
the
now
village.
it's changed. Everybody's got a car, and they drive an hour to get to work, or maybe 2 hours.
It's one of the things that tends to complicate downtown planning today.
right.
So it's different.
It's the car. Wrecked us.
I want to know if the people who are renting here and working here, living in this town and working in this town, who are renters, if they can afford to pay their rent
The rent,
at their current living wage.
okay? That's helpful.
I've heard it anecdotally, but it would be nice to hear like the bigger picture.
Yeah, I've only heard anecdotes, so I want to know if the
Okay.
data is.
Okay,
I would say there's been a lot of questions coming from different sources about the potential impact of short-term rentals either now or in the future. And I think there's been a bunch of us who want to have more information and more insight, A, in terms of numbers, but B, in terms of like what the community wants and how we feel about short-term rentals,
Yeah.
owner occupancy or not, and all those sort of questions. So we can actually decide if we want to change our zoning to in any way address that issue.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's huge.
so we're gonna be doing a survey, so we can certainly try to find some of this out.
Yeah, that's the short-term rentals is a big underlying one in Plymouth. Like, is this helping? Is it hurting? What, like, yeah, that's a great point,
Yeah,
John.
you're gonna get mixed answers, I can
Yeah.
tell you.
I think another one,
Sure.
sort of to piggyback off the short-term rentals question, is ADUs.
Oh, yeah.
And interesting, I guess, perspective on them is, what would the impact be, negative or positive, if ADUs were not required to be a permanent residence in one of them?
Owner occupied.
Like,
Oh, I'm sorry, owner occupied, thank you.
And this
So
has come up
currently-
several times, yeah.
Yep, so currently, at least in Plymouth, to have an ADU, you need to, the owner needs to occupy one of the buildings.
That's correct, right.
I'd like to know how bad of an impact, if any, is it really if we pull that back and say neither unit needs to be owner occupied?
So
so both.
It just turns into commercial real estate, right?
it turns into commercial real
Well,
estate.
it turns into rentals,
Yeah.
you know. But and I'm not disputing that. I agree that that is exactly what's going to happen. But is it actually that detrimental? Because I know it feels detrimental. You're like that. I feel like I don't like this. But I'm actually curious
And there's a real
Is it
difference
actually?
between long-term rental and short-term rental there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is there any
Yeah, and
difference?
this would be in the long-term
Yeah, yeah.
rental category.
Is it any different than long-term rentals of other houses in the town?
Yeah, I'm just curious because I know I don't like the
Sure.
feel of it. I'm like, I don't like that for some reason. And talking long-term, not short-term at all. But starting to think through it, I'm like, but does the benefit actually outweigh?
And it's worth considering, we've been talking about this quite a bit lately, because our building inspector has, and code enforcement officer, has made this a priority. And our select board has kind of signed off on having a kind of yearly check-in for this and all that to make sure this is permitting process to make sure this is actually being followed. And this has caused some conversation on this board about whether that's beneficial or not. Which leads to the next question, which is Matt's question about like, is there even a benefit or not of owner
The owner
occupancy?
occupancy?
Yeah.
Yeah, which I'm really curious. Yeah.
Interesting.
Isn't the alternative to, I mean, you can have multiple residences on a parcel if you file a site plan, can't you?
Yep. Yeah. So through site plan review, you can have multiple dwellings on one lot.
And it doesn't have to be owner occupied.
Correct. Yeah, it doesn't. But what?
So there's your alternative. Like ADUs are specifically.
I'm not looking for an
owner-occupied.
alternative. I'm just saying, say if we redo the zoning of ADUs and remove the owner occupancy criteria.
My point
Is
is
that
we have the function already. Like the only thing that's required is a site plan.
No, I fully understand that. I'm not saying that function doesn't exist. I'm not saying there's no route for someone to achieve that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, what if we did remove the owner occupancy part from the ADU? Is it? I don't know the answer. Is it
Can I just
detrimental or
expand upon that a
please.
little bit?
Yeah.
I think to Matt's point as well, we have to allow ADUs. We can't just do it by multiple units on a lot. By state, we have to allow for
That's
ADUs.
right, you do. Right.
Sure.
So as long as we do allow for ADUs, it is a real question whether they need to be, one of them needs to be owner occupied. And it's a real question in part because it's the only type of residence where we mandate this. Aside from like something like a commercial like rooming house or something. But for residential, it's the only type where we really mandate this.
I think the main concern is about short-term rentals and
Yes.
and ADUs. I think that's one of the reasons this comes up.
And when I'm talking about ADUs, I'm removing the aspect of the assumption that it would both be under a long-term status. So
Right.
it sort of like removes that element, but
Right. So I'm
huge element.
I'm saying that I personally don't see any problem with long-term rental of a house and an ADU on one lot. But I think that the concern gets tied into, incorrectly, messily tied into the concern about short-term rentals.
Definitely.
Okay. All right.
And the question of, I think, owner occupancy and short-term rentals comes up.
Yeah.
And then how do you actually write that so you don't end up like Conway? And having the whole thing thrown out in court. And I think there's a lot of guidance at this point on how to do that, more than when they did it.
Right.
But if we even wanted to go that way.
Where does the law stand at this time regarding short-term rentals
In
and
Plymouth?
the ability to regulate them?
Oh.
You mean in Plymouth?
Well,
Here,
I'm
statewide.
thinking statewide.
There's no,
I don't think it's- there isn't
Isn't there
state
case
legislation.
law?
there's limited case law. It mostly deals with the question of how precise is your zoning. So
Right.
the towns have the authority to regulate them through zoning. There is no, at this time, there's no specific preemption in state law that prevents towns from regulating them through zoning. The case law really dictates, and especially that Conway case, that
Right.
if you're going to regulate them through zoning, you have to be precise about what they are and what they are not. You can't
Right.
have it so broad.
I guess what a resident is, right?
Right. What is a, it gets into some of these questions of, I don't think their zoning ordinance defined dwelling unit as having the word non-transient in it. And I think that brought up some questions about whether a dwelling unit that isn't expressly defined as being for non-transient purposes could then be used for transient purposes. And I think the answer was yes, it could, because they weren't precise in their definition of saying what they really intended or reportedly intended that definition to mean.
Okay. So as part of the housing element, obviously, we were looking at current need and trying to project forward what those future needs might be based on demographic projections. What is your capacity to address those needs? Are there changes in zoning that are necessary? I know you're already working on some, so I think we can talk about those certainly. And then what do people in the community need to understand about housing, Plymouth's housing present and Plymouth's housing future? So those are things that will show up. And I just want to quickly kind of go through some of these other elements that I think are so inextricably related to housing. One is economic development. We already talked about this. It's like, it's not only, the commuting patterns are part of it, but it's also who is in the labor force here? And what is your employment base? And those are two very different things. The labor force is the people who live here, who are 16 or over, and they're either employed or looking for work. The employment base is who works here. So that is picking up a very different demographic. Who are your largest employers, and what are the housing needs of their employees? To what extent are people like micro entrepreneurs, and are they able to work at home in a way that supports the needs of their micro business? How does that work in Plymouth? So these are things that tend to kind of come up. And to what extent are agriculture and forestry kind of part of the local economy? And how do you think about how housing supports those industries as well? Certainly on the natural resources side, we need to understand where the preservation areas are in this community. So we're not talking about putting housing where it simply doesn't belong, either because there are important water resources that people need to want to protect, or important open spaces or vistas that people want to protect. What are the natural resources that are like hands off? Housing doesn't belong here. Housing adjacent may be fine, but what do we most need to protect? And then thinking about how those resources sort of get connected together.
Could that include like resources like open agricultural fields?
Sure,
Yeah. Like
absolutely.
for-
Yep,
yeah.
yep. And open space and rec, I think this is kind of obvious. Where are your parks? Where are your recreation areas? How does housing relate to those locations? Are there places in the community where you have a lot of housing and not a lot of recreational opportunity? And how do you then think about, where you want to see housing, how does that inform your decisions about the future location of public facilities in your community? And certainly, demographic trends affect those questions, just as they affect housing. So this is sort of an example of another thing where housing tends to be inextricably related to these bigger decisions in a community planning process. I think with transportation, it's kind of obvious, like where are people going to work? How are people getting here? Do you have adequate non-vehicular transportation improvements here to support walkability, to support, bikeability? And where, if you're going to promote housing in certain locations, where do you want to think about those most critical transportation improvements? Things about like safe routes to school and things of that nature. Those all have to be thought about when you're thinking about locations suitable for housing. So on this issue of unique conditions, to me, like the number one thing that comes up here is the college, because, I don't know what the thinking is here about the longer term future of the college in terms of housing its students. But we already were hearing, we were working here a year and a half ago, that there's a change happening in demand for downtown situated housing that once may have been very attractive for students and now doesn't have that market available to it. So how do we think about those neighborhoods in this plan? Yes?
I'm kind of beating this one like a dead horse on the board lately, but
No.
We can continue.
What?
there's been a lot of talk from one building in particular, but more broadly from other buildings as well, about taking student housing offline on the campus and bringing it into other forms of housing. And it would be good to get some, I think at least, be good to get some community impact or community input as to how we feel about the university taking housing offline for student dorms and transferring that into some other use, and then also understanding whether that's still a public use of land that exempts them from our zoning. And if not, do we want to change our zoning to actually accommodate the reuse of dormitories as other housing spaces that would exceed 6 units?
Okay, so just help me understand the issue here. That was interesting. You lost me a little bit though, because I guess the question is, should the university allow more students to live off campus?
I think it has to do with their
Or
shrinking student population, to even shrink out of some of their current dorms.
Converting dorms into housing.
For non-students.
I see,
For
I
non-students.
see, I see.
That's
But
what
not
he's
necessarily for students, just housing.
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 Which
Not
could
for
be-
students at all.
Which could be staff, and it could be even broader members of the community, which brings up the question whether it's even a public use of land that's exempt from
yes.
zoning anymore.
That's what I'm thinking, like,
And then all of a sudden, we have these really large buildings that don't fit our zoning, that might not be exempt from our zoning anymore.
Right.
And how do we feel about that?
Right.
And I don't know that we really know how we feel about that.
that's a big planning question.
I think it's a big if.
Need a
I think
legal
we can-
opinion.
Is it a big if? I mean, the current president of the university is talking as if one of those buildings is definitely going offline as a dorm. And he'd like to put staff in there, but he's also saying already it might not be just staff. And once it's not just staff, is that even still exempt from our zoning anymore?
Oh, this is,
Well, we did have married student housing at one time.
But those are students.
That's still
I would say
student
no,
housing.
it's not exempt. That would be my black and white actually. No, if there are residents that are, not students in that, no, that you are not exempt from our housing. I'll tell you that right now.
And so if that's the case, how do we feel about the reuse of those buildings as housing? I think I'd love to hear what the
It's a
community
big 6
thinks.
units. It's going to be.
so, where this very question is, has been and is continuing to be discussed is in communities around the country where there are military installations. And the military decided at some time ago that they didn't want to deal with housing anymore. We're not in the real estate business. So a lot of military housing has been privatized. Well, in order to make it possible for somebody to actually, redevelop and maintain this housing, if you don't have enough service members who want the housing, you're gonna have vacant units, right? So at some point, the private managers of this housing are able to rent those units out to non-military personnel and non-military contractors. At some point, that housing becomes non-military in association. And the big question is, who is then paying to educate the children who live in that housing? Because if it's military kids, the military's writing a check to the town. But if it's on military property and it's not being taxed because it's federal land, but you've got kids coming out of it, big questions.
Wow.
Yeah, I
Big
think
questions.
That's a great comparison, I think.
Oh, yeah, I could talk to you all about that all day long.
That was what I was gonna
Married
comment on. I
student
didn't know how to word it when you
Because they have
said, what do you
families
wanna know more about
children.
housing?
Yeah.
That you don't know. And that's what I wanna know.
Okay, all right.
Because and all these houses that people have converted into housing that used to be neighborhoods, can those go back to neighborhoods, and do we really need to think about more new housing areas across the town? I mean, with all this stuff that's potentially could happen, do we need it?
So, I already talked a little bit about this, I'm not gonna dwell on it too much, except thinking about, because we're just talking about housing, who is actually gonna take the lead on whatever comes out of this, this master plan element? And then being as specific and clear as you can. One of the things I hate about master plan implementation sections is when they use words like, well, support or consider or whatever, which is basically not taking an action because people don't want to say, do this or do that. So I'm going to try to encourage you as we work on this to avoid words that are basically saying we don't know what we want to do. But thinking also like who's responsible and who, if your board is really in unison about a particular type of policy change, who in the community do you need as partners? Who do you need as partners? That's part of the strategy of implementation. Housing seems to relate to everything. I don't think this is any big surprise. And I think that's like my closing argument here. Like, do you have any questions for me that I didn't somehow cover in all of this?
I think we should, if you want to have a tangible outcome, identifiable outcome, we should consider the fact that we have water and sewer on Fairgrounds Road, and we could maybe go a little bit further down the road, you know, without going into the agricultural zone.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That would be a start.
Okay. Anybody else?
I think that your comment about infrastructure to support growth is interesting, because I think there's been two sides of looking at that. Does the town have the infrastructure to support growth here?
Mm-hmm.
And then conversely, growth has been attempted here. The concern of the town doesn't have the infrastructure, but the answer has been, well, that'll be developed when it comes.
Yeah.
So I think, and I'm not saying there's an answer either way. I think what comes first, the chicken or the egg, sort of with the infrastructure part, is does the town have to support it?
Can I ask a follow-up to that?
Yeah, please, yeah. That was my rambling point. That's all I had.
So the follow-up to that, I wonder if we should have clearer guidance, or if this is really just up to the select board on their kind of whim anyway in the end. I shouldn't say whim, but like, I don't mean that in a bad way, but like up to their discretion. Often a developer who wants to put on a larger project, and we've had a few of these in town, will create an HOA to support the road and the infrastructure, and it all looks great because it's not the town who has to pay for that. And inevitably 2 decades later or so, that they say, town, can you take this over and you pay for it going forward? And the expectation is typically yes. And what does that look like in other towns? And is there potential guidance for having a kind of approach to that as a town, or does it just ultimately fall upon the discretion of the select board to just make a decision?
I mean, typically what I see is if a proponent wants to build where there's no water line right now, the proponent has to extend the water line and is doing it according to town standards, and the town is taking over that water line because you're going to have residents who are depending on that water line. You have a public health obligation to them just as you do to somebody who's already served by public water. So the town's ratepayer base increases. But it's the developer is installing the infrastructure and then the town is taking it over. And in the case of utilities, charging rates for usage.
I guess I'm thinking about like roads that require regular plowing and maintenance, and it all looks great.
Huge issue.
It all looks great in the beginning because it's the developer paying for it, the HOA takes care of it, and eventually it falls to the town, and
Yep.
And is that a good burden or not to take over? It's a big question, but
It's
like,
a huge question because
is
people are
there
paying
any way
taxes.
of kind of formalizing that, or do you just have to deal with it as it comes?
I have another input.
It's a policy question locally. I mean,
We went all
there's
through
no,
Chad Darren Lane.
Yeah.
there's no elegant answer to this. I mean, I think a lot of communities have come to rely on homeowners associations, private arrangements to take care of infrastructure. And then when there's a problem that goes beyond the ability of those homeowners to really afford an improvement, then it becomes this moral and political question for the community. There are taxpayers, they're paying the same taxes you're paying, and they're not getting those services. It's a very tough call.
I actually feel like towns should be better about accepting roads as long as they're built to standard.
I frankly do as well.
I've actually advocated to people who live on private roads that they should band together with other people who live on private roads. They'll go to town meeting together and all vote their own roads in together.
Right.
It wouldn't take much effort. Like, and honestly, they
25 efforts.
deserve it. Like, they're paying the same taxes everybody else.
I think it's a big question.
But it also is promoting more sprawling development rather than infill, which in the long term is more cost effective for the town's tax load.
I mean, you can make the argument though that like you know a new development might actually have more residences per mile than the rest of the town roads. In which case,
Depending on how it's designed.
yeah, sure.
Right.
So I mean, it could be actually it could actually be adding a small amount of road to be maintained.
Right.
And it's probably newer and built to a better standard than the existing town roads.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right.
It's a small lift, but yeah, I mean, if it's a sprawling subdivision with no connectivity, I don't see a lot of value in accepting those roads. But I think I think we forget about the value of connectivity. Whereas like Chatteron Lane is a through road. I think that has value.
What's our capacity for our water or sewage treatment plant?
They have more than they're using now, but maybe not enough to do everything that we've talked about.
Because we have sewage lines out on undeveloped parcels, and if those were to get developed, would we have enough infrastructure to support them?
I think Jason gave an update on that.
Yeah, we need to
years ago,
find out.
and
I don't know the
think
answer
there's
to
a
that question.
significant amount of capacity available there.
So that's one of my questions.
Okay, that's helpful to know.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you so much, Judy.
Thank you. It's good to see all of you.
Likewise.
Thank you for coming.
I mean, part of why I wanted to do this is that we do have a survey in the queue for part of this project.
Yeah.
And I don't want to just repeat what we did before, so it was helpful to me to hear maybe questions that you think would be appropriate. And I just need to figure out how to structure that so we don't end up with, 500 open-ended responses that we can't.
Mm.
That's a
Although
great
AI
idea.
is such a big help.
Wow.
Claire, did you have your hand up earlier?
I haven't opened it for public comments yet.
Oh, I know, I just was asking,
Shoot,
that's
don't
why I was
worry.
trying to get your attention as
I
well.
will be.
I got it.
Okay.
Yeah. Judy, are you done?
I'm
Are
done.
you happy at where you're at right now?
I'm happy. This is my last slide.
All right, perfect. Well, at
Thank
this
you.
point, I'll open up for public comments if there's anyone that would like to speak.
Some of these student housing, excuse me, can I be the public? Is it okay?
Close.
She said she didn't want to
We'll
do it.
close this for public comments. Thank
You
you.
have something to say.
Okay.
You had your hand up earlier.
I was thinking about student housing. A lot of these probably had more than 6 apartments at one time.
Yeah, Neil, I see what you're saying about those students who have families have children that go to the school, but they live on campus. So how does that work?
Oh, that affects the town.
Sure. I don't
Yeah.
really
I don't
think
know.
that's a thing
I don't
here
think they have
anymore.
married student housing anymore.
No.
But it was a problem at one time.
Yeah. And also, he's right. It is Chad Darren Lane.
I didn't realize.
Chad Darren.
It's 2 names. Sorry, that's totally non sequitur.
Do you have a comment? Please, come up to the mic. Let's hear it.
I guess my question is for Judy. Claire McCann, Plymouth. Is there any local process for rent increase protection, or is that purely a state issue or state level controlled thing?
Is there even a state level control?
There is not, I'm pretty sure. I think because my questions are about how, and maybe you know this already, but I don't. What percentage of housing in the town is rented versus owned?
We do.
And out of the places that are owned, how many properties are owned by unique people
do you mean
versus
by
singular landlords versus
by
landlords?
unique?
So I'm unique being per.
Primary
like
residence.
how many of the towns that are owned how many of them is one family owning one house versus one family owning 3 houses and therefore renting them. So I'm just curious about the ownership spread of properties within the town, and therefore the influence of those landlords on the rental costs in town versus general market flows, and if the town envisions potentially enacting any rent controls as a means of offering some solution to affordable housing crises that is a more national level, or is that something only the state can do?
A good question.
I am not aware of any authority for a city or town in New Hampshire to regulate rent. I don't think you have that power here. The answer to your other question about like how many properties are individually owned, it's a little tricky because when you have a landlord who may own multiple properties, they're often listed under individual LLCs. That's sort of not the same. But you can usually kind of figure it out through where the tax bill goes. So it's a good question. We recently worked on a housing plan for one of the college towns in Massachusetts, and the number of LLCs and trusts and I had worked in this town 10 years ago, and I mean, it is a sea change difference. So we can look at that and probably should, because it might give you a little bit of a sense of like, well, who actually is benefiting from the rental stock that exists here now? Yeah. It's a good question. I don't know the answer, but we can look at it. We can at least try to get a handle on it.
And the first part of that question, is the percentage rentals, is actually in the housing study.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we are higher than most of our neighbors.
Oh, yeah, you are.
Especially because of the school, for
yeah.
sure.
Right. Right.
I'd like to revisit, so one of the things that's in the current master plan is it identifies that, in the 2018 plan, it identifies that roughly 75% of acreage in Plymouth is in current use. I'd like to see that updated when we revisit the master plan.
How much is in there now?
Yep.
That's also a good question, yeah.
Only because, of the 25% that's not in current use, then you take out the property that's owned by nonprofits. So you might get down to 20% or something like that, and that's what's carrying the majority of the tax burden for the town.
Yeah.
Definitely, if you want to see development, force land out of current use, and you'll see.
No, I'm
development.
not suggesting
That's
that.
exactly what will happen.
I'm not suggesting, I mean, it's actually pretty cheap to take land out of current use.
I'm not taking, yeah, but then, I'm not arguing the 10% to take it out of current use. My point is, if you want to see development in this town spread across open parcels, force it so someone can't have it in current use, and that land will be.
I think current use is great. I'm not suggesting to get rid of current use.
Numbers, just so we know.
Yeah.
State law.
I know, but you hear this. You hear. I'm not saying from your standpoint, but a lot of people say, oh, if those 20 acres were paying, full price property taxes, it would add to the base. Well, if those 20 acres were paying full price property taxes, you
And
might.
this is a statewide question anyway. We don't really have a whole lot of power over this in Plymouth.
So you were, sorry, finish your sentence. You were saying if those 20 acres were not in current use, then.
Yeah, so I think it often forces the hand of the owner to
Sell it.
Consider
Develop.
development.
to consider development.
Yeah, because it's so
I'm not saying
expensive.
it's
Yes.
Yeah, I understand.
gonna happen. I'm just saying.
No, I see.
It-
I see the logic. Yeah, it makes sense.
I
totally-
sense that you're having a wonderful conversation among yourselves. My question is, do you still need me here?
Any other
About
questions
current
for
use?
Judy?
Pardon me?
You don't want to talk about current use?
No, I don't want to talk about current use.
Judy, you're gonna make me go watch Nantucket's housing meeting.
Oh,
I can't believe you're gonna make me do
We're
that.
actually going to wrap up upon your departure, so we can all go home and watch it because I'm curious.
I think so.
Yeah.
We all want to see.
this is
I hope
just,
everyone's focused.
it's just pure, self-interest on my part. I have 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and noon appointments tomorrow morning.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much for attending tonight.
3.5 hours to get here this afternoon. I was not happy. But I got here on time.
Yeah, Highland Street's a bear.
Pardon me?
Traffic on Highland Street is tough right now.
That construction.
You guys are so funny. Oh, my God.
Thank you very much, Judy.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Judy.
no, I think I'm.
Thank you, Judy.
I'm fine to be here. I think I'm supposed to be back in December. I got to go back and look at the engagement calendar, but you will hear from me before then because we do want to roll the survey out next month.
Yeah.
So this has been. I had a selfish reason for wanting to do this meeting the way we did because I'm trying to think about questions that we can ask and how to frame them that were probably not part of the previous project. I don't want people in the community to feel like we're just sort of redoing what was already done. So.
Well, I really like your point about multifamilies. All right, is it a density? Like, Are we coming at it from the wrong angle? And is there another?
See, Matt, I think that the 6 unit is a constraint. The question is it the overwhelming constraint, or is it density?
Yeah, and I've never thought about it.
And I'm trying to meet the community where you are. So if there's really a lot of concern about changing the number of units in a building, then maybe we need to look at just what the density regulations are. And, 18 is pretty low for multifamily. I mean, it is, but it's like, that's sort of in the realm of something to talk about. But I would be lying to you if I said 6 units is fine, because I think it's a problem. But I think the bigger problem is density. So, anyway.
Thank you so much.
What's the date of that Nantucket meeting that I need to look for?
Yeah,
It's
but
Tuesday night.
What is it on?
Tuesday
It's
night.
Tuesday night.
It's Tuesday night.
30th.
And
Okay.
fortunately, they had one of those owls in the middle of the room, so, because there were like, I don't know, 26 people there or something, it was 4 boards. And so it was never on me. It was just absolutely magnificent. But I felt for the poor town manager, because if you look at the recording, you can see often it was like split screen, so you could see her and maybe a few other people. But that poor woman was on the screen almost the entire time. I thought, how do you keep a straight face? Honest to God, you are a blessed soul. So anyway, but I am going to head out if you don't mind, unless there's something else you need from me tonight.
Go right ahead.
Does
have a
Martha's
popcorn viewing
Vineyard
party at
have
your
the
place.
same problem as Nantucket?
So let me tell you something fun about working on there, because we work in both. Never in Nantucket do you say, boy, this reminds me of Martha's Vineyard. And never on Martha's Vineyard do you say, boy, this is just like Nantucket. Different as night and day, honest to God. I mean, some of it is Nantucket's 30 miles out at sea. Whereas the Vineyard is close enough to Falmouth that people can commute if they choose.
I met a guy out there who had a business out there, and he told me they had this sign that they used to put out there every summer that said, "Some are people, some are not."
And on that, have safe travels home. That's excellent, Bradford.
Guys, all right, I'll see you later.
Bye.
Take care, thank you.
Take care, bye-bye.
Be safe.
Summer
Very
people.
good.
Summer not.
Is that going in the minutes?
Put that in the minutes.
About summer help
Let it
too,
be
like
shown
when
in
you
the
hire, when you hire kids for the summer help, summer not.
I like that. I appreciate that.
So they made
Oh
sure
my
they put it out
God.
when some people came back. That was one of the-
Population in Plymouth used to triple in the summer. I don't know if it still does.
That was back in the days of the train, when people would come up to get out of the city because it was hot here and it was cooler here.
2 trains a day, every direction, both directions.
Yeah.
Well, that was a good conversation. I was glad to have Judy tonight. Is there any other unfinished or other business from board members or planning staff that I'd like to discuss tonight?
Oh, boy.
Moving on to item number 9 on the agenda. Are there any public comments tonight? The microphone is open. Anyone online? Doesn't appear so. Well, with that, I'll close public comments for the night.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it. One can't.
You can't.
It's just a food for thought.
Second.
All in favor of adjournment for the night?
Aye.
Opposed?
Hey.
Abstentions?
You guys can stay
2
here.
opposed. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, you guys stay here.